Dr. Tim Stratton called me a liar and slanderer. A liar and a slanderer because I wrote this. And he quotes me here. This is under his post, Freethinking Ministries, in response to me. And you'd have to get all the context of that. But the video here is from Freethinking Ministries, why I was bad at cross-examination and what I've learned. So that's the video under which these posts reside. And he wrote here, let's see. Okay. So he wrote in response to me. I wrote that Dr. Tim Stratton believes that fallen men or unregenerate sinners can actually conjure up saving faith in the gospel of Christ out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will, their power of contrary choice. And he says that's completely false and an outright lie. I never said anything or implied anything like that. I am a monergist who affirms that God must do all the work in our salvation, that I can do nothing to earn salvation, and that I can do absolutely nothing to be in the presence of God. Please don't put words in my mouth or spread lies. If you are a Christ follower, you ought to strive for truth and seek to avoid slander. So liar, liar, slanderer is what I am, apparently, according to Tim Stratton, because I made this truthful statement about his theology. All Arminians, in fact, or all rather synergists, Arminians, semi-Pelagians, full-blown Pelagians, believe that man can conjure up saving faith in the gospel out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will. That's where they think saving faith comes from themselves. For Tim to call himself a monergist is laughable. This is synergism 101. He's a synergist. And he calls me a liar for saying this very thing. But if you simply ask any synergist, they would have to affirm that. Dr. Braxton Hunter said, but I have to endorse the check. Right, God can give me all the money to pay all my bills. That's like grace, and versus somebody who's fallen, not having any money to pay bills or something, and God can write me a check and for all that and more. And he says, but I have to endorse the check. And what Dr. Hunter meant by that was, I have to conjure up saving faith out of the cauldron of my own human libertarian free will. When Dr. Leighton Flowers talked about being a choice piece of meat, fit to be chosen by God for salvation, that what he means by that is we must conjure up saving faith out of the cauldron of our own human libertarian free will. Tim doesn't seem to be able to put that conclusion together from his own theology. Okay, but again, that's a demonstration of his own ignorance of his own system. Not anything, false that I'm saying. I'm trying to get to the fundamental issues here. And that is a fundamental issue. Tim believes that fallen men, or all synergists believe, fallen men or unregenerate sinners can actually conjure up saving faith out of the cauldron of their own free will. They also believe that once they do conjure up this saving faith out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will, that results in regeneration. That results in regeneration, which they say comes from God, and rightly so. But notice, they've had to conjure up saving faith in order that God will then regenerate them. So God simply responds to what they do in a positive way. I have never said or implied anything like that. Yep, you have. Your entire theology implies that. Absolutely, it does. Just like your Molinism implies that God's omnipresence, his exhaustive, infallible foreknowledge, is actually dependent on the creature and the choices creatures make and the events that occur in time, just like Dr. William Lane Craig. And I went into it a little bit of that in the comments section with Tim. I don't think he's ever seen, for example, this video by William Lane Craig. Notice what Craig says about how God knows all things, how God is omnipresent. Let's listen to Dr. William Lane Craig's answer here, and this is just amazing stuff. I've done this before, but it certainly bears repeating. I'd play this clip at the beginning of every one of my videos if I could.
We've been talking about divine omniscience, God's being all-knowing. And in the last class, we raised a problem that is occasioned by God's knowledge of the future. If God foreknows everything that happens, including our choices, then are we really free to do otherwise than as God foreknows we should?
Good question. Excellent question. Are we, quote, free to do otherwise? Except I wouldn't choose the term free. I would say, do we have the ability? Simply the ability, the power. Because getting into just throwing the word free over all this stuff as if, you're just sprinkling the, free choices versus what? Enslaved choices? The Bible teaches enslaved choices by fallen, unregenerate sinners. The choices that make are enslaved choices, not free choices. But he should use the terminology of simply ability.
In other words, does God's foreknowledge imply a kind of theological fatalism about the future, that everything that happens necessarily? And I argue that conclusion does not follow, so long as we keep clear the distinction.
It does follow. So William Lane Craig is fibbing at this point. This is where his Molinism, his egocentric philosophy, will start to overshadow his systematic theology, unfortunately.
Between the chronological priority of God's knowledge to the event foreknown, but the logical or explanatory priority of the event foreknown to God's knowledge. God's knowledge does not determine the event. If we use the language of determine, we would say that the event determines what God foreknows.
There you go. Do we want to listen to that again real quick? Okay, here.
Knowledge does not determine the event. If we use the language of determine, we would say that the event determines what God foreknows.
The events that occur in time, all the events that occur in time, all the choices that creatures make in time, those all determine what God foreknows. Without those things, without the events that occur in time, without the choices that I make or the choices Craig makes or the choices Tim Stratton makes, without those, God doesn't know it. We determine. This is Molinism now. This is why the Reformation, the Reformed especially, people like Francis Turretin, in his Institutes of Elenctic Theology, right here, writing in the 17th century, okay? And this is volume 1, wherein he will deal with issues of theology proper and middle knowledge. This is why people like him absolutely refuted this nonsense by Dr. William Lane Craig. This is borderline blasphemy, by the way. Or it is straight up blasphemy. Blasphemy against an essential attribute of God, namely his omniscience and his omnipresence. Saying that his omnipresence is dependent or determined by creatures. Okay? Apparently, this is what Tim Stratton believes too, though I don't think he even knows. I don't even think he even knows his own position, that this is what his position is. Turretin refuted this and said the same. In fact, I should have probably opened to the. Let's see, I might have it marked here. Let's see if I have it marked. Just real quick. Decrees of God in general, predestination in particular. No, I think it's right here. I think it's right. There we go. The origins of the middle knowledge. Devised by the Jesuits, and Turretin mentions 3 different Jesuits: Pedro de Fonseca from Portugal, Leonardus Lessius from the Netherlands, a Jesuit from the Netherlands, and Louis de Molina, obviously a Jesuit from Spain. So all 3 of these men were Jesuits, working on behalf of Papal Rome as part of the counter-Reformation against the Reformers. The design of the Jesuits, says Francis Turretin, writing in the 17th century, the design of the Jesuits, he was a son of the Reformation. So he's sort of the next generation of reformers after Luther, Calvin, and all them. And I would simply call Calvin a younger brother. Instead, I know a lot of people say Calvin was a next generation reformer compared to people like Luther and whatnot, but I would say he's actually just a younger brother of the reformers. The design of the Jesuits was to defend the semi-Pelagian heresy of foreseen faith and good works in election. Okay? The semi-Pelagian heresy. Notice semi-Pelagianism is a word that is being used by Turretin in the 17th century. It's a proper term. The Pope, in the meantime, to whose tribunal the whole matter was frequently referred for his infallible judgment in an affair of so great a moment, slept and did not dare to determine anything. I think that's kind of funny. This invention was afterwards adopted by the Socinians and the Remonstrants, the Arminians, who courageously defend it so as to preserve free will in the citadel. I just want to go to Turretin's conclusion here. Okay, right here. This middle knowledge, this idea of middle knowledge, takes away the dominion of God over free acts of creatures, because according to middle knowledge, the acts of the will are supposed to be antecedent to, logically prior, but not chronologically prior. That's what William Lane Craig was just talking about. Because the acts of the will are supposed to be antecedent to, that is before, the decree, God's decree, and therefore have their futurition not from God, but from itself, from themselves, from the creature itself. Indeed, listen to this, God would seem rather to depend upon the creature in middle knowledge. God would seem rather to depend upon the creature, while he could decree or dispose nothing unless a determination of the human will were posited, which God would see in such a connection of things. Turretin recognized this in the 17th century, and I got to tell you, I really appreciate when people like William Lane Craig are this honest about their own falsehoods, errors, and lies. Now, he doesn't recognize it, obviously. To say that that the events in time and the choices creatures make determine what God foreknows, and therefore God's omnipresence is dependent upon the creature, is a blasphemous statement. I'm sure glad William Lane Craig is saying it, though, and being explicit about it. So, getting back to the lie, though. Unregenerate sinners, all synergists teach that they can actually conjure up saving faith out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will. Of course, Tim isn't going to answer the question, from whence does faith come? But I thought I would answer it in the Reformed way and how they answer it. Am I lying about what Tim believes? I don't think so. That's exactly what they believe. But let's go to this is the Synod of Dort, and this is under the third and fourth heads of doctrine. Okay, I just want to show you here. Third and fourth heads of doctrine, okay, of the corruption of man. This is total depravity. Total depravity. So in the acrostic TULIP, TULIP, the Synod of Dort actually presents the tulip as ultip. Ultip, ULTIP. That's the original way in which they presented, because they were responding to the 5 articles of the Remonstrants from the Arminians. So they put the corruption of man, total depravity, and his conversion to God in the manner thereof. This is irresistible grace. Irresistible grace. So they put the T and the I together here under the third T and fourth I, heads of doctrine. Okay? I'm going to scroll down to Article 14 under the third and fourth heads of doctrine. This is important. This is why I responded to Tim that in contradiction to what Calvinists believe in, for example, the Synod of Dort. He believes that saving faith is something conjured up out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will. But this is what the Synod of Dort says, and this is what the Bible teaches. Article 14, faith is therefore to be considered as the gift of God, not on account of its being offered by God to man to be accepted or rejected at man's pleasure, but because it is in reality conferred. Salvific faith in the gospel of Christ is in reality conferred, breathed, and infused. Notice that, infused into him. Now, the authors of the Synod knew the power of the language of infusion. Infusion, because Roman Catholics were using infusion with regard to the doctrine of justification. That in justification, we are infused with righteousness. Okay, we actually become righteous people, fully righteous human beings in justification. But that we can lose that righteousness, lose that justification, either by more venial or mortal sins and things like that. And we got to get it back through the sacerdotal system of Rome, that kind of thing. So this is the treadmill of the sacerdotal system of Roman Catholic soteriology. Utterly fallacious. The reformers recognize the imputation of the righteousness of Christ and the imputation of our sins to him on the cross, the imputation of his righteousness to all of his people. So we use the term imputation, not infusion. So when the authors of the Synod of Dort use the language of infused, I mean, that should throw up a red flag. But here, notice what they are saying about infusion. They are saying by God's grace, he infuses saving faith into the elect. That's where saving faith comes from. It's infused by God, by his grace, into us. We did not conjure it up out of the cauldron of our own human libertarian free will. And they go on, or even because God bestows the power or ability to believe. This is prevenient against the Arminian doctrine of prevenient grace, by which God effects a change in a sinner, which frees their mind, giving them a freed will, wherein now they possess the power of contrary choice to either accept or continue to reject the gospel proclamation. They reject this. When God graces a sinner, he infuses saving faith into them. They can't help but believe. They can't do anything other than believe. So not because God bestows the power or ability to believe and then expects that man should, by the exercise of his own free will, consent to the terms of salvation and actually believe. That's what Tim believes. But because he who works in man, both to will and to do, that is God by his grace, and indeed all things in all, produces both the will to believe. Notice, God by his grace produces both the will to believe and the act of believing also. He produces that act of faith. Are we active in faith? Absolutely we are. There's no question about it. We are only active in our faith because God is active first. Okay? The act of believing also, infused into us by God's grace. So this is where I was coming from when I was saying that Tim Stratton believes that fallen men, unregenerate sinners, can actually conjure up saving faith out of the cauldron. That's where saving faith comes to with regard to synergism. Now, he responded, and I think he put something in something. Oh, yeah. He goes through, he does this, looks like a copy and paste job of Ephesians 2:8. Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So when I wrote, you are praying that God would bestow, these are my words now, so Tim is quoting me here. I wrote, you are praying that God would bestow his miraculous grace upon them and by it infuse faith into them. Notice I used and I emphasized the word infuse, or the phrase infuse faith into them, right from Dort. A lot of people don't know that Dort uses that strong language of infusion of faith. I'm sure glad that they did, because they are not covering this up at all. This is what they are teaching. God by his grace infuses salvific faith into his elect. And then he says, not quite. We pray that God would bestow his miraculous grace upon them. So he agrees with that. But notice, there's nothing miraculous about God's grace if it doesn't effectuate any change in them. Arminians say it effectuates a freed will. I don't know what Tim believes about that. So he's either Arminian or semi-Pelagian. However, individuals do possess the freedom to resist God's amazing grace. First of all, resisting God's amazing grace demonstrates that they are not free, they are enslaved. So a misuse of the word freedom here, which all synergists constantly misuse the term human freedom or just simply freedom. That's not freedom, that's slavery. They are the only ones in hell. Okay, consider the following. So again, resistible grace. God's grace is not powerfully efficacious without my contribution of my own free will act, my own choice, which comes out of my own power of contrary choice, to conjure up saving faith within myself out of the cauldron of my own human libertarian free will. Apparently, that's what Tim believes. And then for some reason, he copies and pastes some nonsense about Ephesians 2, verse 8 here. And you can it is like a copy and pasted, unless he wrote this himself, and I don't think he did. It's in quotations. But he said Ephesians 2:8 emphasizes that this setup, this arrangement, right? Ephesians chapter 2, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works that he had foreordained that we would walk in them. But he wants to take, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God. Okay, let's just stick with that phrase, because he's going to deny that faith is a gift from Ephesians 2:8, and he's going to use this this is such an outdated argument that has been refuted so many times. I can't believe he would even post this. Remember, saw that the word this is neuter, whereas faith is feminine. So this doesn't refer to faith. Again, that's such a nonsense argument, because here's the thing. Ephesians 2:8. The whole idea, what he's trying to say here is that the this is not of yourselves, the gift of God it is, cannot refer to faith, because the word this is a neuter pronoun. And the rule of thumb is that you look for the same gendered noun that is antecedent to the pronoun, in this case, this. It's got to be the same gendered noun to go with the gender of the pronoun. And so the gender of the pronoun, this, is neuter, but faith is a feminine noun. So it can't refer to faith. A lot of people are duped by this. But notice, does it refer to the grace? Does it refer to the salvation? Does it refer to the faith? Does this, being neuter, refer to faith? They say no. Tim is saying no. Then does it refer to saved? Does it refer to grace? Well, grace, it can't refer to grace either, because you know what? Grace is also a feminine noun. This is a neuter pronoun, so it can't go. So grace apparently is not the gift of God that is being talked about here. See, I hope everybody's noticing the ridiculous nonsense of making these statements. How about saved? Is that what is referred to by the this? The neuter pronoun this, saved? Well, first of all, saved, you are being saved, is a verb, and it is, it's masculine. It's not neuter either, it's masculine. And faith again is feminine. So grace is feminine, a noun. Saved is a verb, a masculine verb. And then faith is a feminine noun. But this is neuter, and there is really no neuter noun that this can go with. So what's the deal here? What do we do with that? Right? According to this argument that Tim copy and pasted, apparently, remember we saw that the word this is neuter, whereas faith is and so is the grace. That's also feminine, and the you have been saved, or you are being saved, that is a verb in the masculine. This, and notice just this dogmatic statement, so this doesn't refer to faith. It refers to this arrangement of salvation by grace through faith, also known as this plan of salvation by grace through faith. It's just a plan. That's all Paul is talking about in Ephesians chapter. It's just the plan of salvation. It's up to you to get into that plan, or to remain distant from that plan, or outside of that plan. Or rather, it's up to you to get into the plan of salvation, and up to you whether you stay in the plan of damnation. Okay? This is the plan of salvation. So you got to get into that by the power of your own contrary choice, by conjure up the saving faith out of the cauldron of your own human libertarian free will. That arrangement is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God. Okay? It is God's sovereign choice to save people in this way, by grace through faith. By the way, they are not people, they are disgusting, wretched, rebel, sinful people in this way by grace through faith. So, I don't know why Tim would insist on not reading certain things that he probably could be reading. And so I would recommend this book right here, The Potter's Freedom. You guys know this. James R. White. Let me turn to page, is it 295? Yeah. 295. Yep. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, page 295. And I don't know, it says at the top, the New Revised Edition, right up there. I don't know if there's maybe one more edition after this one. I've had this book for many, many years. And let's see what Dr. James White. Now, James White is a student of Greek. I am not. But, okay. The simple answer is, why is a neuter used for faith being a feminine noun, grace being a feminine noun, saved being a masculine verb? Why is the word this neuter? The simple answer is this. The entirety of the phrase, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this, it is good Greek grammar to use a neuter pronoun to wrap up a phrase or a series of thoughts into a single whole. Paul's point is that the entirety of the work of salvation does not find its basis in men, but in God. That includes the faith. Not just the grace, not just the salvation, but the faith. So what of the claim that Ephesians 2:8 teaches that faith is the gift of God? It is common for Arminians to triumphantly point out that since faith is feminine and that is neuter, it cannot be that faith is the gift referred to. But this is only partially true. The Arminian would have to admit that the grace mentioned in Ephesians 2:8 is a gift, yet it is feminine. It is a feminine singular as well. Which, if we follow their reasoning, would mean that grace is not a gift any more than faith is. Such argumentation is too shallow to allow a meaningful conclusion to be drawn. There is no reason, contextual or grammatical, to accept the fact that two of the three substantival elements, grace and salvation, are a gift, while the third, faith, is strictly a human contribution. The whole thing in Ephesians 2:8 is the gift, the grace, the salvation, and the faith. Notice James White's argument to presuppose that faith requires a human contribution, namely that saving faith is something that we conjure up out of the cauldron of our own human libertarian free will. So this is, in fact, what Tim believes. Saving faith is something human beings can conjure up out of the cauldron of their own human libertarian free will. So aside from myself being a liar, it is, in fact, Tim who is lying to himself in his theology. I'm a monergist, says Dr. Tim Stratton. Nope, you're a straight-up synergist. More than likely a little bit more semi-Pelagian than Arminian. Unless you can talk to me, unless you want to talk about prevenient grace or something like that, and then I can figure out if you're an Arminian or a semi-Pelagian. But anyway, that's all I had to say on that. Dr. Tim Stratton calling me a liar, slanderer for making this statement. James White just made the same statement. There is no human contribution in saving faith. You know, we are, I said we are active in faith in the sense that we do the believing. That's the only active sense. But as far as saving faith being a gift, we are passive in that. God's grace working in us, infusing faith, we are totally passive in that. God works that. So anyway, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think about that. Ephesians 2:8, very important. Very important. I would get, refer to other works as well, but James White's book, The Potter's Freedom, it's in there. It's just a good examination of Ephesians 2:8. And when people bring up this idea that this is neuter, well, again, point them back to grace. So grace is feminine, so it can't be referring to that either, which is ridiculous. The whole thing is a reference to the gift, nature, that is the grace, the salvation, and the faith. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking about all that. We'll talk to you soon. Soli Deo Gloria.